Now, this next conversation is hinged on three figures. They are 8 years, $4.2 billion, and $472,513, and probably some cents. Now, let me break it down for you. In the last 8 years, Nigeria's excess crude account has lost 89% of its value, dropping from $4.2 billion to just $472,513.09. I believe that's where the change is. Now, the excess crude account, or ECA, was established in 2004 to help Nigeria save oil revenue that came in excess of the budgetary benchmark price. And it has faced its fair share of controversies over the years. Now, despite its good intentions, the ECA has been riddled with controversy, allegations of corruption, and uncertainty with its performance. And now, with the announcement of the massive drop in funds from the account, more questions are being asked. How has Africa's largest crude oil producer lost so much from the ECA? Joining me now is Seun Dania. He's an oil and gas analyst, and he'll take us through this conversation. Seun, welcome to Business Edge. It's been a while, but it's good to see your face again.
Morning.
Good morning.
Pleasure to be here.
So it really sort of boggles the mind when you see that the ECA has gone from billions to just hundreds of thousands of dollars in 8 years. So let's even start with that. In terms of what could affect the balance of what is inside the ECA, what's been the experience that Nigeria has had? Why is it struggling to have money in this account?
So the ECA, the excess crude account, is an account that was created to basically, in layman's terms, hedge, for plan for the future. So it's kind of like an account that is set to put the excesses, revenue excesses, from the budgeted amount. So say Nigeria oil prices about $100 then. It was set up in 2004 by the president of the government of President Olusegun Obasanjo, when oil prices were, significantly going about $95 or $100 a barrel. And, the benchmark price at that time was, maybe $52. So the excess was kept in that account, for a rainy day, and it was working very well. The reason why, of course, we've seen, the pandemic, COVID-19, we've seen the drop in oil prices globally, and that has resulted in, the government, the federal government, and of course the other arms of government, the legislative and judiciary. Well, they work hand in hand with the governors and, local governments to ensure that they're able to utilize these funds properly. And because of the drop in oil price, it had seen that there was no excess. So it really more been deficits. All right. So, and infrastructure needs to be developed. So I believe that is the reason why the government has been drawing from that account. However, there are issues around the legality of the excess crude account, which makes it a little bit not so transparent for people to understand, because the account shouldn't be utilized, unless we are in a very dire situation. And I don't see, maybe, the pandemic, but other reasons for, infrastructure development, local government expenditure. Really, the first thing that the government should do is actually cut the cost of governance, as opposed to dipping into the excess crude account, because as it is right now, with this depletion, we are definitely in a fix, because if anything were to happen,
we'll get to the legality of it, and I like the fact that you brought up that government has dipped its hands into the excess crude account. So let's talk about that. So in July of this year, the ECA was actually around 376,000, and so this 472,000 is actually an increase from what Nigeria saw earlier. But there was a $35 million disbursement from the account in June 2022, which was said to be an advance payment for the purchase of brand new offshore patrol vessels for the Nigerian Navy as part of efforts to, of course, secure the Gulf of Guinea. But it was also in July that the Minister for Budget, Finance and National Planning said that the government had withdrawn $1 billion to fund security amid depleting revenue. So you've talked about the fact that this is supposed to be a fund for a rainy day. COVID has come, of course, the Ukraine-Russia crisis has come. What do we classify as a rainy day? If we don't expect government that has dwindling revenues to deal with, but also has security needs, possibly health needs to deal with, what should the fund be utilized? Sort of paint a picture for us of a scenario in which we would expect government to dip its hands into the ECA.
Yeah, scenario, I would say a global pandemic is a scenario whereby you basically, at that time, the whole world was grounded. Everywhere was locked down. We did not have any any. There was no people. Nobody was. It was. There was There was a lot of uncertainty. You know, people were losing their jobs. Businesses were not thriving. So definitely, the other means of government getting money, which is maybe to tourism, travel, taxes, and all of those things were not certain. So in that kind of a scenario, yes, you can then it's okay to say yes, you're dipping your hand into your excess crude account,
So
in order
purchasing
to
vessels
salvage the
for
situation.
so purchasing vehicles for security doesn't meet the standard of what government should be doing or what government should put their hands into the ECA cookie jar for.
No, yes, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Okay.
Because there are still several other means that the government can raise funds for those purposes.
Okay, so let's go to the legality issue because one of the issues that the fund has faced involves this lack of transparency, a lack of anti-corruption controls as well. And in a 2017 report, the National Resource Governance Institute ranks Nigeria as the second most poorly governed fund among 34 resource-rich countries due to the account's absence of rules governing deposits, withdrawals, and investments. Let me ask A of this question. Is there some kind of ledger? Is there some kind of documents that we know it may exist, but we may not have access to it? But does a document exist where we can track the withdrawals and, of course, the inflows into the ECA?
Yes, documents exist. So traditionally, before this excess crude account was set up, basically by law, all monies should actually go into the federation accounts. Mm-hmm. And then can then be properly, disbursed. But of course, in order to save, the administration that set it up made it, sort of like a way whereby, yes, not by law, but yes, it's between themselves, the Senate and the governors, the Federal Executive Council, basically, to then see and come together to say, well, let us take out of this money for this purpose. It is clear. It is transparent. If we recollect, maybe sometime maybe some years ago, I really can't remember when. There was a time when the Auditor General actually flagged this to say, well, there's a problem because they are not able. The accounts are not balancing. It's government revenue anyway, and we should be able to account for it. So it's not a closed door session where people come together and say, well, let us share this money because we have these needs. We have the government revenue should be properly, appropriated. So to answer the question, yes, there are documents that are available. They are not publicly available to everyone, but definitely the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation has access to them. The Office of the Accountant General have access. I'm sure definitely the Ministry of Finance also have access to these documents.
So as you said, we've used funds from the ECA for federal, for state, as well as local government needs in some interesting ways. But in 2011, the National Economic Council also approved a plan to replace the ECA with the National Sovereign Wealth Fund. And its objectives were basically the same as the original ECA. And interestingly enough, Nigeria has continued to maintain the two accounts concurrently. So this is my last question before we wrap things up. Do you think, given how, in a way, successful the SWF has been, that the excess crude account, the ECA, has outlived its usefulness? Is it time now for the ECA to be subsumed under the Sovereign Wealth Fund?
Yes, it should be subsumed under the Sovereign Wealth Fund. The Sovereign Wealth Fund is backed by law, and so far so good. I believe it has been doing a great job. However, the challenges are it still boils down to political struggles and cohesion between the executive, the National Assembly, state governments, and the local governments. Some governments believe that the ECA should be obliterated 100%, and others believe that it should be legalized. So people, because of the fact that it gives power to certain parts of government to decide how that money should be spent, it's difficult to then completely transition it, without that political will. Because remember, the Sovereign Wealth Fund is managed by the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, the NSIA, and so that takes out a little bit of power from all of the local governments, the state governments, the National Assembly, and the executive from making 100% decision on how the ECA will be spent. So I believe it's just a little bit of political will, the conflicts between that, but everything still boils down. There's political will, and between the legislative arm and the executive, they can either they can always readjust the laws, to make sure that it is it works for everybody.
Yes.
I believe that the NSI is also working in the interest of the country and the interest of the people. The legislators, the governors, the local governments are also working, and the executive are also working in the interest of the people. So I believe that we can find common ground in order to move the country forward.
All right, Seun, Dania, thank you so much. Of course, 89% of a drop from billions to hundreds of thousands, not what we want to see, but there is still potential given the benchmark in the budget and where we see oil currently right now. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Have a great day.
And there's a lot more conversation on that, but the numbers keep ringing in my head from $4.2 million to 472,000 plus some change. But given the benchmark of crude oil in Nigeria's current budget proposal, there could be some opportunity for the excess crude account to, of course, rise up again. But has it also outlived its usefulness, and should it make way for the NSIA?